My last few videos about the ASUS Zenfone 9 have been relatively positive, but there was one glaring issue that almost led to me returning the phone. So before I get into the 6 reasons I decided to keep the phone, let's expound upon that one glaring problem. The year is 2022. Data transfer rates can reach 40 gigabits per second. Netflix is losing market share. But for some reason, ASUS decided to put USB 2.0 on this device. Given the aforementioned facts, I would have assumed USB 3.0 or USB 3.1 or USB 3.1 Gen 1, USB 3.1 Gen 2, Super Speed USB, the one that can transfer data at 5 gigabits per second. I would have assumed that would have been the port of choice for this particular phone. Instead of 5 gigabits per second, we're stuck with 480 megabits per second, which is roughly 10 times slower. That problem alone was enough for me to factory reset the phone, turn it off and put it back in its original packaging, and start the return process. But then I started to think, how often am I actually going to use that port? Very often. But then I started to think some more, and I realized I already had a device that would allow me to transfer large files relatively quickly. The Sony Xperia 5 Mark III, and not to talk about that phone too much, and I'm going to try my best to get my hands on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV when it becomes affordable. But back to the Zenfone. Long story short, USB 2.0 was not enough for me to let go of the phone. So here are the 6 reasons I decided to keep the device. I'll be honest. A few months ago, I broke down and I bought one of those USB-C to 3.5 millimeter headphone dongles. I purchased it when I actually owned a Pixel 4a, which has a headphone jack, but I knew at some point in time in the near future, I'd have a phone that no longer had a headphone jack. But I'm proud to say that that's not an issue with this phone, because this phone has a headphone jack. It's 2022, and I know most people have converted to Bluetooth headphones, and in fact, I have a pair of Sony wireless noise canceling headphones myself, but the headphone jack is a nice alternative to Bluetooth or having to live that dongle life. The next reason I decided to keep the phone is because it gives the user the option to use 2 physical SIM cards. While I know this feature is not important to most people, I do actually use both SIM trays. I have my main line in one tray and my data only line in the other tray. In a world where Apple just removed all physical SIM trays in the iPhone 14 sold in the US, I believe the best option is one physical SIM and one eSIM. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, didn't he just say 2 physical SIM trays was the reason he chose to keep the phone? And the answer is yes. For my specific use case, it's exactly what I need. For a while, I was walking around with 2 phones in my pocket, one iPhone and one Android device. Because each line was using a physical SIM, it was easy to pop both of those SIMs out and place it directly into the Zenfone. Side note, the Sony Xperia also has room for 2 physical SIM cards. Now in the future, I probably won't need 2 physical SIM cards. In fact, I probably won't even need 2 lines. But if the phone that I'm using allows me to keep one physical SIM card in the phone and gives me the option to activate an eSIM if I need it, I think that would be optimal for everybody's needs. But for now, 2 physical SIMs serves my needs perfectly. It's expected that with a small phone comes a small battery, but that couldn't be further from the truth with this Zenfone. This phone has a 4300 milliamp hour battery. Combining that with the efficiency of the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, this phone easily allows me to go 1.5 or 2 days between charges. To give a comparison, the Galaxy S22 has a 3700 milliamp hour battery. The Zenfone 9's predecessor has a 4000 milliamp hour battery, and the Pixel 6a, which has a larger screen, has a 4400 milliamp hour battery and a less efficient SoC. Something else that also aids in allowing me to go 1.5 to 2 days between charges is the adaptive refresh rate. The ASUS Zenfone 9 has an adaptive refresh rate that allows the display to ramp up to 120 Hz and scale down to 60 Hz. One thing I like about this one is that I can force it to any of those 3 options. To give that statement more context, let's look at the Samsung Galaxy S22. We can set it to dynamic or 60 Hz. My main gripe with this implementation is that I want the display to stay at 120 Hz while I'm watching content that would benefit from a high refresh rate. But we can see that the refresh rate ramps up only when I actually interact with the phone, and there is no option to force 120. On the Zenfone, I have the option to set the refresh rate to variable. It too changes refresh rate when I interact with the phone and not while watching content that would benefit from the higher refresh rate. But situations where I want to keep the refresh rate at 120, I just set it. The number 2 reason I'm keeping the phone is something that's not unique to this device in particular. It's the fact that it runs Android. In my opinion, Android is a far better operating system than iOS. Yes, there are plenty of positive things to say about the iPhone, but for my needs, Android is simply better. Here are a few reasons that Android is better for me. I use Bluetooth a lot, but I do not like answering phone calls through my car's radio. On Android, you have the option to tell the phone explicitly not to route call audio through specific Bluetooth devices. With an iPhone, if I'm driving around and the car is connected to the radio via Bluetooth, anytime I get a phone call, that call automatically gets routed through the car radio, and I simply don't like that. Another reason I prefer Android is the alarm clock. I like knowing that if I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m., and if I happen to wake up at 5 or 5:15, a little bit before my set alarm clock, I have the ability to dismiss an upcoming alarm. By dismissing the alarm instead of turning it off, that means I don't have to remember setting the alarm again. I know I could just let the alarm go off and then turn it off at the time that I set, but I just don't want to have to do that. 2 more things I think Android does better: notification management, and the fact that when I plug an Android device into a computer, I can navigate its file system. Apple tries to pretend that the iPhone is not a computer, but it is. And the last thing that I'll say about Android is I prefer it because it has USB-C. Even if it's USB 2.0, at least it's not Lightning. And the number 1 reason I'm keeping this phone is because of its size. Coming in with the screen size of 5.9 inches, this is one of the smallest Android phones around. In fact, I can't think of any Android devices that are actually smaller. The Sony Xperia 10 Mark IV has a 6-point-inch screen, but everything else I can think of starts at 6.1 inches or larger. Now, truth be told, the phone that I've been using for the past year is actually smaller than the Zenfone 9, and it's the iPhone 12 mini. But I think I found something that's going to take its spot. If you've made it this far, I'd like to say thank you. I know that was a rough one. That was my first time actually attempting to write a script, or my first time writing a script. It'll get better. It will. But the last thing I actually want to talk about is the fact of how important competition is. So I know people complain about things all the time, and one main thing that people are complaining about right now is the fact that the iPhone 14 no longer has a SIM card. I mentioned it in my video. For me, among other things, mainly the fact that the iPhone also doesn't support RCS, and Apple's CEO Tim Cook has decided that the phone probably is never going to get it. These are things that I don't like. So for other people who also don't like things, the best way to express your grief and frustration is to do one of 2 things. You can email Tim Cook, and I'll try to put his email address right there. And again, it's there for us to use. So say something positive. Let him know that you prefer something else. Let him know that a feature is missing from the iPhone. I mean, he explicitly said our customers aren't asking for RCS, so therefore we're not going to implement it. And in case you don't know what RCS is, I'll probably have a video on it at some point in time, and I might even include a link in the description about it. So that's something to consider. But if you don't like the fact that the iPhone doesn't have a SIM card anymore, for most people, that's probably not an issue. But for me, it is. And the best way that I can show my disapproval of something that a company is doing is just simply not supporting them. So if you don't support Apple, or if you don't support Samsung, or if you don't support ASUS or Google or whatever, do whatever you can to not support them and not give them any money. So again, thank you very much. If you've made it this far, competition is very, very important. And always remember that when you're making your purchasing decisions.